All right, does the slide show up?
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the May 13th Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting. Everyone should be connected with audio through this webinar. If you are calling in, we will unmute you when it's time to speak. The presentation is going to be recorded. It's going to be posted to the Washington County Solid Waste and Recycling webpage within 1 week. If you are in the audience this evening and you have any questions, you can submit them through the Q&A section or raise your hand. If you have any technical issues, please reach out to Zoom. Only the committee member may recognize a public attendee. You may use the raise the hand or Q&A feature as I just discussed. And there is designated time on the agenda to allow members of the audience the opportunity to speak to the committee. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Ken.
Okay, this is Ken Foote. I'm a public member of the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee. And let's go through, and I'll just do this. So Tom, if you want to go next.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. This is Tom Eggleston. I'm the division manager for the Solid Waste and Recycling Division and a non-voting member of the committee. And let's go through and introduce committee members first, and then we'll introduce guests. So I'll pass it to Ashvin, maybe.
Ashvin Nagaraja, I'm a public member. Pass it to Sandra.
Ann? Are you a staff? Is Ann a staff member?
Sandra, you're muted.
I'm Sandra Smith, unincorporated Washington County staff member, and I'll go to Beth next.
Beth Vargas Duncan, industry member, and I'll go to Vinod.
Vinod Singh, unincorporated Washington County industry member, and I'll go to Carl.
Unmuted. Carl Peters, general manager, Recology, and industry member. And who's left on here? Danielle.
We have Kathy Christie here. Kathy, are you there? Or Erin, can you unmute her so she could talk, maybe?
She didn't dial in, so I think she's going to have to unmute herself.
We do have Kathy Christie here for the record.
Okay. A public member, yes. And Danielle, have you in it?
Danielle Groves. I am a partner at Marina and Company, so I'm here as a guest.
Oh, okay. And I guess Kathy. Unmute, Kathy.
Too many screens open, sorry. Kathy Folsom, Solid Waste and Recycling Division staff.
Okay. Tom, do you want to go ahead with the
yeah, Sue
updates?
Looks like Sue is here now too. So Sue, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sue Shade, public member.
Welcome. Good evening, Sue.
Yes.
We also have Erin Stein with Washington County staff. She's moderating the tech tonight and does have an agenda item. And we have Amy Lecoq and Nick Olheiser with Recology here for an agenda item as well. So I will go ahead and start into the updates. Thank you, Ken. I have a few updates this evening. My first one is I wanted to just share and remind everybody that we are kind of full swing in recruitment mode for advisory committee members. We have 3 positions that we're recruiting for. And Kathy shared a flyer that we've created that we would welcome you all to share with folks that you know or might be connected to or your networks. Just remember that we are looking for people that live in Washington County, and there is preference for folks that live in unincorporated Washington County. So that's something to keep in mind. The 3 positions are public member positions, and we will be using the new bylaws as our guide when we go to recommend appointments to the board. So if any help you can do there would be greatly appreciated. We are trying to share through our networks as well with some of our volunteer groups and our partner agencies that we work with, and our community-based organizations that we work with. Next update, the civic Metro has launching a civic capacity grant program. This is a program where Metro is trying to help community-based organizations build capacity to engage in decision-making processes. Some of the funding is coming from the solid waste system, so those funds are intended to support and solid waste related work. So those organizations that receive those grant funds will be expected to help foster interest and opportunity in more civic engagement in the solid waste decision-making processes and solid waste processes. So we do anticipate there's a couple finalists in Washington County. We expect there will be a grantee in Washington County. We've talked with them about the committee being an opportunity for community members that are interested, as an example. So if there's recruitments and they're working with community members to engage, build interest, serving on the committee, also attending committee meetings, testifying to the committee. There's all kinds of opportunities for engagement, I think, that haven't necessarily been exercised in the past much with our committee, but it's always, community members are always welcome to come and talk with the committee and share ideas and discuss concepts. So we're going to keep working with them, try to help foster opportunities for civic engagement in this topical area. And we're looking forward to seeing who comes out with one of those grants and what that leads to. We'll keep you all updated with what we know. Senate Bill 582-A is the modernizing organs recycling legislation we've been updating you on every month. It's still sitting in Ways and Means, waiting to be assigned to a subcommittee. Sounds like it's been a long time there, but my understanding is it's not necessarily bad news. They're busy with budgets and other money related matters. So I don't think anyone's worried that it's dead or anything. There's an update on some new support. So the Oregon Refuse and Recycling Association had been kind of neutral in the past, and they've kind of come into the camp with full-fledged support. So we're looking forward to seeing that play out in Salem when the bill gets back into discussion topics and discussion areas, and we can see ORA lining up behind the bill with the state and with local governments. And I think that's a pretty strong coalition. So we'll see if that can take it over the finish line this year. My last update, so Ridwell, we've been talking about Ridwell, giving you updates every month about Ridwell. Ridwell has officially made a written request to Washington County to ask the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee to hold a public hearing, essentially to make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners whether their business should be exempted. This is a section of county code that, as far as we know and our counsel, our attorneys know, has never been tested. There's a section 8.04130 that says that the advisory committee may make a recommendation to the board as to whether a business practice, process, or wastes shall be exempted from the requirements of having a certificate. Ridwell is asking for that consideration of your committee, and we do anticipate that June 10th will be the date. So the next meeting will be the date that we will hold that public hearing. We'll be working with our county counsel, our attorney's office, to kind of set the ground rules for the public hearing, kind of identify how much time we provide to different parties and how much time we limit public comment to, if there's public comment. We're going to work with Ken to set that up, because Ken will be chairing that meeting and carrying us through that public hearing. So it's going to be a new experience for us. We've never really had a public hearing at this committee, as far as I'm aware of. So it's going to be exciting. The Washington County Haulers Association has also sent a proposal for an expanded service option, and we want to make sure that the committee gets a full picture of what ideas are on the table and different proposals. So after this meeting, or during this meeting, maybe the second half of this meeting, Kathy will send an email out to the committee members that includes both memos, one from the Washington County Haulers Association and one from Ridwell, that requests this opportunity. We will be working over the next month, like I said, to kind of figure out how we're going to approach it, how we're going to manage it. We're not sure if a lot of community members will show up, but it's a public hearing, and so people will be allowed to show up and speak on behalf of their position either way. So more to come there. It's going to be, like I said, it's going to be an interesting opportunity and experience for the committee to weigh in on a topic that is very has a lot of interest right now in the community. So, and that's it for my updates, unless there's any questions about those.
Are you going to send us the actual proposals from Aura and from Ridwell?
Yeah, Kathy will go ahead and send the actual memos the county received. And then there will, of course, be a staff report and more information as we get closer to the meeting. But just to kind of so you're all aware of what has been sent to us, we want to make sure that you see that information. I see Beth has her hand up.
I just want to clarify, this is not an Aura position. This is from the Washington County Haulers Association. Aura is a statewide association, and Washington Counties is a separate legal association. So the Washington County Haulers Association, just clarity there.
Can I ask
Okay.
if you've heard from James Recycling and
Yeah.
what they plan to do?
So we after we had a couple of conversations with Ridwell, and we circled back with James Recycling and offered them the same opportunity. And James Recycling graciously declined the opportunity to basically attend a public hearing and ask for an exemption. They were indicated they're busy in Portland. They don't necessarily have the capacity to expand, and they're working on events right now. So they are currently not pursuing anything further with us.
Okay.
When we do an exemption, well, just a question, is this a across the board exemption, sort of, we now have opened the door and anybody who wants to apply for this kind of a service can do it? Or is this a one shot for Bidwell and they are the, it would be a one shot exemption for them only? Anybody else come, we would have to deal with it as a separate request for an exemption.
I think it could be either way.
Okay. Has
So
anybody?
the code says a business, a waste, a process, or a practice. So I think that's pretty broad. So it could be a business. It also could be a business model or a practice or a process, or just even a specific waste type of waste. So I think it's pretty open for interpretation on what that means.
Yeah, I was just wondering if we were lifting the tent for one camel to stick its nose under, or taking the tent away altogether. Have we had anybody request an opportunity to communicate? That's next.
I have a follow-up to that. So I mean, maybe we can cover this other time, but what totally does the exemption, I mean, is it just operating, or is it, what does it cover?
That's a very good question. As I said, our attorney said this code is written in 1969 and no one has ever asked for this. So this is a first. Our council has interpreted it to say that the board has pretty broad discretion on what they want to exempt, how they want to exempt it. So it's not necessarily a flat out, oh, we'll never hear from you again if they did decide to exempt it. I think there's an opportunity for conditions, criteria, all kinds of things in an exemption. That's how our council has interpreted it, but there's still a lot to unpack, I think, as that conversation continues.
And I think that
wouldn't carry over into anything they're doing in other cities or other counties.
Only unincorporated Washington County. Okay. Only unincorporated Washington County even. And
I would request that we know that to the extent possible, have other jurisdictions in Washington County tackled this same question and what they're
you will be
reading.
The first, Ken.
Lucky us. Okay. My son has it in Portland, and I've seen their nice little white box and everything.
So the city of Portland has given Ridwell, our understanding is the city of Portland has given at the staff level Ridwell permission to operate in the city. But there's some question whether or not that is in alignment with their code. And we understand they're working on some policy changes in their code to align with their direction. So I'm not exactly sure what the situation is there, but in Washington County, the city of Beaverton City Council had a work session on the 13th of May to discuss the issue. And they kind of directed staff to go bring back more information and learn more about it and have another conversation with their council. So they're expecting to go back in June. City of Hillsborough was approached a little later than everybody else, but I think they're going to be having a similar conversation in Hillsborough. Tigard has also been approached by Ridwell, and I'm not sure exactly where they are. They're kind of doing research right now, trying to understand what others are doing, looking at different code language examples that are out there.
Is Ridwell a large national outfit that is expanding into Oregon, or are they a local?
Well, they're from Seattle, and they have business in Seattle. My understanding, they have about 20,000 customers, I think, in Portland and Seattle combined, and about 6,000 in Portland area now is what they are saying, I think, on their materials. So they're not huge, but they're started in Washington, and a lot of their experience with solid waste regulations are from the state of Washington, which are not obviously necessarily apply in Oregon. So there's a little bit of back and forth on that topic with a lot of jurisdictions, is our understanding.
Any other questions about Bidwell? Then let's move on to
Looks like
Recology.
Beth's got her hand up here.
Oh, Beth's got her hand. Oh, I missed that.
Sorry, just a point of clarity. Tom, you covered it really well, but I think it's been a long day and you said May 13th is when the Beaverton City Council heard it. It was April 13th in case anybody goes looking for that meeting.
May 13th is today.
I know.
Sorry.
Just for the record, it makes it a little bit easier when you're searching for a meeting. I'm usually the lost one. And then there are a few other local jurisdictions that Ridwell has approached, including Lake Oswego, at Clackamas County and the surrounding areas in Clackamas County. So they're hitting a number of the jurisdictions in the metro area. And then they have been, Metro itself, regional government, has been looking at the warehouse that Ridwell has so that it could be licensed. And that's been some complication there as well, because Ridwell's gotten a bit ahead of itself with, I understand Metro's concerned that there's been collection going on that isn't specifically authorized under local code. And then they have this warehouse operating, and Metro will not, as I've seen in emails to me and others, that Metro is not licensing or will not be able to authorize them until things are legal. So just thought I'd mention that as well.
Oh, okay. So moving right along, let's tackle Recology, next line item.
Hey, Ken, since I'm the general manager for Recology, just to ensure there's no perception or view of conflict of interest, I'll be sure to recuse and go offline when this presentation takes place.
Okay. So who is going to be representing you guys? Or go ahead, Kathy.
If it's okay with you, Ken, I thought I'd do my presentation, and then Amy and Nick are here from Recology to do a overview of their facility, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions.
That'd be great.
Okay. So good evening. I'm Kathy Folsom with HHS staff. Recology Oregon Compost Inc., the owner and operator of Recology Organics North Plains Compost Facility, has submitted its application for the renewal of its franchise agreement with Washington County. The current agreement expires June 19th, 2021. Washington County Code Chapters 808, Sections 180 through 300 direct the application process, and it requires that your committee make certain findings. These findings and your recommendation will be provided to the Washington County Board of Commissioners for their consideration. Upon receipt of the application on January 27th, 2020, that was updated on January 22nd, 2021, staff began its review of the facility application. In addition to the review by the Solid Waste and Recycling Division, the code does require that the Land Use and Transportation Department, County Council, and any other agencies with legal authority also review the application. Pursuant to this direction, County Council determined that due to the substantially similar nature of the proposed agreement to the existing agreement, the application would be considered a simple renewal. Land Use and Transportation has determined that the compost production remains in conjunction with farm use and approved minor site alterations at the facility on February 11th, 2021. The Oregon DEQ, although not a county department, does regulate Recology Organics North Plain under its water quality and solid waste rules. DEQ's Water Quality Division and Solid Waste Division hold 3 permits with the facility that are all considered in good standing. Currently, Recology's DEQ solid waste permit is in the process of being reviewed. Staff did attend a DEQ public hearing regarding the Recology Organics North Plains facility permit on May 6, 2021. Attendees asked questions of DEQ and Recology and expressed some concerns about potential facility odors. However, no formal comments were provided during that hearing. The Solid Waste and Recycling Division, your committee, and ultimately the board's review is guided by the criteria contained in Chapter 808 as outlined in Attachment A to the staff report. Additionally, our code enforcement staff reviewed facility inspection reports and found that the site is currently operating in compliance with the existing franchise agreement. Through the review of the renewal application and inspection reports, staff proposes that the applicant meets all relevant criteria for renewal. As noted, the franchise agreement is substantially similar to the existing agreement. The proposed renewal contains a term of 5 years, consistent with the current agreement and Chapter 808. The authorization to accept Type 3 materials, which includes yard debris and food generated from residential sources only, is consistent with current authorizations. And there are other minor edits which could be characterized as housekeeping in nature. Based on the review of the application, the proposed findings outlined in Attachment A to the staff report, and the responses received from permitting authorities, staff recommends that the Washington County Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee favorably recommend that the Washington County Board of Commissioners approve the renewal of the franchise agreement between Washington County and Recology Oregon Compost, Inc. for the operation of the Recology Organics North Plain compost facility. Thank you for your time. As I mentioned before, Recology would like to make a short presentation regarding their facility.
Okay, to move things along, I'll make a motion that we advise the county commissioners to approve another 5 years for Recology, and then we can enter the discussion phase. So do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Sandra. Okay. Amy or Nick, which of you wants to go next?
I can start us off. Kathy, do you have our presentation?
Aaron has it.
Yep,
Oh.
I'll pull it up.
Thank you, Erin. All right, well, thank you, staff and advisory committee members for giving us an opportunity to present to you today. My name is Amy Lecoq. I'm the Group Environmental Manager for Recology's Pacific Northwest region. And with me tonight is Nick Olheiser, our Recology Organics Manager here in Oregon. And we're happy to present to you a little bit about our company and specifically the North Plains Compost Facility in Washington County. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, we'll talk about who Recology is as a company, the facility in question, the North Plains Compost Facility, and its current operations. We'll also talk about some improvements that we'll be making this summer. We'll talk about a summary of complaint data, and then we'll share a little bit about our efforts to support the community around us. Next slide. So for anyone not familiar with Recology, we are an integrated resource recovery and recycling company that provides hauling, collection, processing, composting, consulting, and disposal services to homes and businesses in the Western United States. We are a 100% employee-owned company, and we see a world without waste. This is the vision of over 3,000 employees, and it's been our mission for a little over 100 years now. Next slide. Recology currently operates 10 composting facilities on the West Coast, 3 of which are located in Oregon, and the largest of the 3 is the North Plains facility here in Washington County. Composting is a closed loop ecosystem that has a huge part to play in waste reduction, sustainable agriculture, and climate impact. By collecting and composting our food scraps and yard trimmings, we create a rich soil amendment that adds nutrients to crops, provides moisture retention for landscapers, and sequesters carbon back into the soil, just to name a few benefits. Next slide. So the facility that we're here to speak about today is the Recology Organics North Plains Compost Facility. It's located just outside the boundaries of the city of North Plains in Washington County. The facility is 66 acres in total, with approximately 29 acres operational space. And Recology acquired the facility in 2009, but it's been permitted and operated as a compost facility since 1999. The site employs 9 direct employees, and currently the facility accepts yard debris from surrounding communities and yard debris mixed with food scraps from the cities of Portland, Forest Grove, Beaverton, and Hillsborough. Next slide. And Nick, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amy. Again, as Amy said, my name is Nick Olheiser. I'm the operations manager for our Recology Organics facilities up here in Oregon. That includes Almsville, McMinnville, and the facility that we're talking about today, our North Plains facility. I hope you all can hear me well. And if you see me looking back and forth, I have 2 screens and I prefer to look at the bigger one. So just ignore if I'm looking back and forth. But to go a little bit more in detail, out here at our North Plains facility, to build off of Amy's last slide, here pictured is an aerial photograph of the North Plains facility as it currently sits. Just a brief walkthrough of the site here, kind of the quote unquote life cycle of the material as it arrives to the site, and how it goes through the facility here. You'll see right in the center of the slide, we have the scale house where our scales are located as well. Just to the north of that scale house, we have our active aeration compost pad, which has our receiving pad as well. This is where a lot of the obviously the aeration is being done on this pad itself. A lot of the active management is occurring on that pad right there. Kind of on the center, towards the center right there, you'll see our north cure pad. As material leaves the active aeration compost pad where it starts in the process, it'll either go to that north cure pad or down here on the left bottom portion of the slide here, you see our southern cure pad. Material either goes to one of those 2 locations after the aeration pad. After curing, it then travels over here to the right, the bottom right, to our finished compost and screening storage area, where it is then screened, stored from there, and ready for sale after all that. Other portions of the facility, we have a maintenance shop located at the facility. And then on the upper right-hand side of the photo here, you see our leachate lagoon that collects all the water that runs off of our active aeration compost pad is collected and stored in that lagoon, as well as our treatment tank over there, kind of towards the upper center of the photo here as well. So just kind of a brief overview of the facility. And if you want to go to the next slide, we'll go a little bit more in depth of the process itself. So as yard debris and mixed food scraps arrives at the facility, it's dropped off at our receiving pad, which is pictured here over here on the left, our incoming material right there. As it's dropped off, we blend that with a woodier product to not only get a good CN ratio, but also increase the porosity of the material. If we're noticing material that's coming in is a little dense for what we're wanting for the aeration portion of that. After we get that blend in, that is then ground. This grinding process kind of essentially helps us ensure that the larger materials like branches and sticks and all that get broke down in a much more controlled size. Also on top of that, not only minimizing and get a consistent size through the grinding effort actually helps us blend that material a little bit more. So we have a really good consistent size blended material that we can then transport down to our aeration pad from there. Next slide. So after the grinding occurs, the material is then scooped. It's taken down to one of our individual piles. Material is then placed on these piles, and these piles sit on top of pipes which you can see here kind of in the center upper portion of the screen here, our air piping and blower system. Materials placed on top of those pipes. Those pipes are connected to a blower, which essentially exhausts that or pulls air through those pipes and exhausts that air to a biofilter, which is located here on the left. The biofilter is essentially just a stockpile of clean wood chips that's brought in from an outside source. It helps destroy and minimize odors that's generated during the decomposition process, during the breakdown of the material that's being placed on top of these pipes. Liquid that leaves this material enters drains. That liquid we call leachate throughout the facility. Those drains you can see kind of here on the bottom of the screen, the liquid leachate collection drains. You can see where it's pointing right there. The material or the air pad itself is sloped to allow for drainability towards those drains. That liquid is collected and then reused on the composting piles during the spring and summer months when moisture conditioning is a very important portion of our process as we get drier conditions going throughout. After approximately 30 days on this aeration pad here, the material is then placed onto one of two of those cure pads that we looked at in the photo earlier. It stays there for an additional 30 days. And then it is taken back to the screening process where it's screened to a consistent size. It's tested, stockpiled, and then ready for sale after that. Next slide, please. So this summer, one of the big things that us here at Recology, hopefully you guys at Washington County and as well as residents of North Plains should be exciting about, is we're working on installing a new state-of-the-art composting system at our North Plains facility. The photos shown here are from our sister facility down south in Almsville, just outside of Salem. These efforts were wrapped up late November, and the facility turned on at full capacity in the beginning of December. Really a quick encompass of what the project entails. Currently right now at North Plains, we have multiple small blowers, anywhere from 5 to 7 horsepower blowers. Those blowers are going to be replaced with one large blower, which increases the amount of aeration being pulled to that material. It's kind of really interesting. Currently right now, the blowers are about 3 by 3 by 3. They're almost like a nice perfect cube. If you look here on this left photo, it just so happened that we had a vehicle in the photo while we took this drone view. You can see in comparison to the blower that's shown here on the left, comparison to a size of, I believe that's a Subaru, smaller Subaru Outback. You can see how large these blowers are that we're putting into this new process and implementing to make sure that we have enough adequate airflow through this material. The biofilters that are currently at the facility will be deconstructed and reconstructed to a larger, more robust process. All the aeration piping is being moved underground, which not only cleans up the facility, but it also increases efficiencies at the site as we're not trying to operate around these pipes or pull the pipes out of the material before we move the material to a different portion of the process itself. All of this is done, all this composting process is being done what we call a mass bed, which is shown here on the right. If you look on the upper right-hand photo here, you can see the 2 arrows pointing to the mass bed. So instead of having individual aeration piles and or zones, we have essentially tabletop mass bed aeration pads, essentially, that not only allows us to reduce odors on site by minimizing the amount of square footage that's exposed to ambient air, but it also allows us to compost more material in the same footprint as well. It helps us control liquid management as well. With mass bed, there's less available asphalt to collect rainwater and or water from our irrigation practices, which could potentially pose an odor issue from there as well. And increasing safety and efficiency for not only our employees, but our customers, more importantly. One of the other things that we'll be doing at the facility is moving the current office and scale house that sits right in the middle of operations. We'll be moving that to the entrance of the facility to open up that space where it's currently at for composting operations, and also to allow for a much more safer flow for our customers that visit the facility as well. Currently right now, they do enter a portion of our operations to get to that office. So by minimizing that, we minimize any kind of risk from there. One thing that we did last summer is we conducted a pilot project at North Plains on a much smaller scale, but a pilot project to demonstrate mass bed composting and the process and how it would work at the North Plains facility. The results from that pilot project were astounding. We noticed that with the same amount of footprint, we're able to put more material while reducing the amount of of runoff space. But one of the more important things, not only did the pilot show us that this is a very beneficial process, but since December, when we turned on our Almsville facility to open capacity again, the results have been far surpassed actually what we assumed the results would be. The benefits of this process has actually really widened our scope of how beneficial this process is. These blowers, this technology that's now available to composters like us, and for us to be able to capture that compost technology and implement at this facility, I think we'll not only see a benefit operationally, but from a community base as well. Next slide, please.
We know that whenever we talk about composting, people will ask questions about odors on site and off site. A compost site can never be odor free, but we do strive to be good neighbors. This graph shows a history of complaints by full year during the franchise agreement term, and all complaints are investigated by Recology staff, as well as Washington County Code Enforcement and DEQ solid waste inspectors who conduct odor monitoring in the area. Weather inversions can be challenging for us, so we adjust operations whenever possible during weather conditions that are more difficult. Next slide, please. And so all of this discussion about being a good neighbor is so important to Recology because it is truly part of the fabric of our culture. Recology believes in giving back to the communities where we live and serve. These are just some of the ways on the screen here that we've given back to North Plains and the surrounding community over the years. And we plan to continue this level of support to the city and the county moving into the future. And with that, that is our presentation for this evening. We thank you for your time listening to us, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have two questions, I guess. The first one is for Nick. Just to, I want to make sure that I understood that the system pulls the air through the rows. Is that correct? And then that air goes through a biofilter?
Correct. So its kind of more technical name is a negative ASP, or a negative aerated static pile system. So as materials placed on those pipes that are connected to that blower is pulling air down through the material that's being composted, essentially, captures that air through the piping, and then discharges that air to the biofilter. And the biofilter is what does all the work as far as odor mitigation. And that biofilter is really just a pile of wood chips that house microorganisms that eat away at VOCs and malodors, to where if you're standing on top of that pile of chips, you might smell somewhat of an odor, but if you leave and go further away on site, and especially off site, that's where you have the reduction of odor, especially as you get further away from that.
Okay, and so just so that I'm correcting my memory here, was it ever the case that air was pushed through the rows rather than get drawn down through the compost material?
No. So not during the time that I've been there, and Amy's been there since 2000, since the very beginning, so she could speak to it as well. But no, we've never had a quote unquote positive aeration system at the facility.
Okay,
no.
All right. So that's just me not remembering correctly. And so, Amy, I want to ask you, because this is something I was going to ask at the end. Did you say that folks in the community are able to bring their yard debris to the facility at no charge?
That's correct. So we accept yard debris from North Plains residents at no charge, and we also provide compost to those residents as well. And Nick can speak more about that.
Yeah, great. Okay, I just want clarity on that, so thank you.
Well, on the technical side, Nick, at one time, I think before Recology was involved, they used to turn the rows. They put long rows and then they would turn them, sort of like the old days when you did hay. Is this whole aeration system replace that? And I don't remember them having aeration at the time at all, any kind. So,
No, so it doesn't replace that, and the turning of the material, possibly back in the day, was on the active side as well, but the turning still occurs on our cure phases. So as material is brought in, it starts on the aeration, goes through our cure phase. We are still actively turning that material weekly to ensure it doesn't go anaerobic. And with this upgrade, we still do turning on a mass bed level. It's actually a specialized turner that we'll be purchasing that turns mass bed. So the turning still will be an active part of the composting process.
and lastly, when you run it through the screening at the end to get your final product, the stuff that gets screened out, the stuff that doesn't make it through and get into the product pile, where does it go?
So that's what we call our overs or our seconds. That goes onto our overs belt, which passes over a suction system that pulls out any kind of contamination, such as plastic. We then take that material and we put it back through the process. So on the incoming portion of it, if we get loads, especially this time of the year with the dense grass material, we actually use that because it's generally our woodier portion of the system. We put that into that system and fluff it back up to get a porosity and a better CN ratio. And then we grind that material from there. So it's really a nice closed loop system to where any of the seconds that come across that belt, we'll repurpose it. Any of the material that comes across the belt and it's overly contaminated and we can't use, from there, we would look at disposing it or trying to rescreen it to get more of that plastic out so it can be reused.
And lastly, Recology has ordinary solid waste hauling trucks I see down in Portland. Do you have a separate division that's a hauler?
So we do have other divisions that are a hauler. None of our actual hauling divisions haul into the North Plains facility. On the route side, we have commercial trucks out of our Settle Road and Metro facilities that do bring us commercial loads in there that are essentially collections from other companies that are dropped off at our transfer stations. But our McMinnville location, Portland, as well as our coast locations, we do have collections out there as well.
Okay.
And can I clarify, Nick, when you say commercial, you mean like trailer, 53-foot trailer, not business waste?
Correct. Yes. Thank you for that. Yes. Commercial in the sense of long haul truck.
And where are we at on food scraps?
At the facility?
Is that one for us or for Recology?
That's for somebody who knows the answer.
This is a really good question, Ken. So we, Hillsborough, Beaverton, Forest Grove have done food scraps collection programs for residents in Washington County. We have been hesitant to embark on that in the past because Recology North Plains has been the only facility in the area that accepts that type of material. And we were concerned about the resiliency of a facility that was both reload, so the trucks drive straight there, and process there. So if there was an accident or if there was a odor issue like we experienced in 2012-13 at the facility and we lost that facility as an outlet, we would have a problem because we would have a program with 65,000 households signed up with nowhere for the material to go. So those equations are starting to change. Pride Disposal in Sherwood received a grant from Metro and they have expanded their facility to be able to reload type 3 residential waste. So that kind of helps build a second point in the county where material could flow if it couldn't flow directly to North Plains. There was also some concern about truck traffic at North Plains, and I think that has not shown to come to fruition. As the cities of Beaverton and Hillsborough have come online, we haven't heard any complaints from neighbors or community about truck traffic there. Our understanding of the other issue is their facility has been operating at about 56,000 tons per year as their operating capacity. And this mass bed expansion will increase their ability to receive more material. It doesn't change their authorizations. The tonnage cap remains 80,000 tons in our franchise agreement as it has always been, but it might open up more capacity for them to essentially, as Nick said, compost more on the same footprint. And that might introduce the conversation that comes back for us to reconsider our position on whether or not we think there is enough resiliency in the system to look at a type 3 residential program for unincorporated. The other consideration is that we have every other week yard debris, which if we wanted to go weekly, it would be a pretty significant investment and cost to ratepayers. But Hillsborough has successfully demonstrated food scraps every other week for over a year now. And Metro also recently approved every other week food scraps as part of the regional service standard for residential yard debris programs. So, and food scraps. So that gives us a little more confidence in that approach as well. So I think it's a conversation that's coming back. We have a lot of community members that are interested. We hear a lot. We get a lot of emails. Our commissioners get a lot of emails from folks saying, when are we going to do it? So I think this is part of that picture. And I think it will be time for us to have that conversation again in the near future.
And you know, I'm the big proponent of wanting this.
There you go.
Fighting this for a long time. I was going to ask, does unincorporated Washington County's yard debris go to Recology right now?
No, because Recology is one of the only facilities in the region that accepts that type 3 feedstock. It's been pretty much prioritized for that material. And unincorporated Washington County's material doesn't have food scraps in it, so it's mostly flowing to other facilities. A lot of it goes to Hillsborough landfill, which they reload there, and I think I understand it goes to Beaver Bark in Scappoose to be composted, and I think some of it ends up at Grimm's in Tualatin as well. I'm sure it goes other places as well, but if residential food scraps were introduced, it would definitely likely go to Recology in North Plains.
And right now Portland's does.
Portland, Beaverton, Hillsborough, Forest Grove.
Is there like a time limit, or is that forever that the city of Portland can have their food scraps come out to our backyard, and those of us who live here can't even recycle or compost our food scraps?
Well, they're not necessarily related. I mean, the county has not turned on the program, so it's not necessarily Portland's flow that's restricting our ability to do the work. I know that Portland's program is not going away, but if material was coming from Washington County, then the Portland waste would likely be diverted south to Almsville or another facility east of the metro region if if it didn't have capacity to come out to North Plains.
Yeah, I'd like them to take theirs so we could have some. And also, Amy, is free compost only for North Plains residents, or can I come out and get some?
Nick, you want to answer that?
Or is it?
So currently right now, we do offer the free compost only to North Plains residents at certain times of the year. And we'll try to work on expanding that.
Do you sell it?
Yes, we do. Yep, we sell it at a retail level and a commercial level for bulk as well. So it's available for sale every day at the facility.
For like someone like me who could buy a bag of it, or does it have to be a large amount?
So we are kind of more geared around like half yard increments. However, if you have buckets, we have a bucket price and you can come out and get like 5-gallon buckets. We got away from the bags years ago because they're kind of wasteful and they couldn't be repurposed. So buckets are definitely something that we very much encourage and welcome.
If you bring your own bucket, sure, I'll come out.
Okay, so let's, we have a motion and a second. So all those in favor of recommending this staff report to the county, aye.
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 Or more importantly, anybody opposed? Well, I've been doing this for some time, and I've discovered that it's one or the other, and so it passed. Let's move on to rate review.
Thanks. We'll record that as unanimous.
Yes,
and I
please.
do see Kathy Christie is not here anymore, so it's 5 to, and Carl abstained, so 5-0 anonymous, unanimous. Thank you.
And if Carl's not listening, somebody ping him and tell him he can join us again. Oh, good.
I wasn't the one that barked, Ken, just so we're clear.
Okay. So,
Well, from a lighthearted laugh into rate review, we'll make the transition. Good evening, everyone. As Tom mentioned, I'm Erin Stein. I'm the operations supervisor for solid waste and recycling. And I have the pleasure of going through my second rate review process with the county this year. I also have Danny Groves with us this evening. She is from Marina & Co. That is the solid waste and recycling's contracted CPA. So in case you have any questions that are a bit above my head, we have her here as backup and support. So give me just a second. I have a presentation to share this evening. All right, so we have wrapped up our discussion, or I'm here tonight to discuss the 2020 annual rate review. And we have a few key stakeholders in the rate review process. The first is our community members. We want them to have confidence that their garbage and recycling service rates are fair and equal for all payers. We have Washington County, the elected and staff, and they confirm the garbage rates are fair, just, and reasonable for all rate payers. And then we have the haulers, and we want to ensure that they receive a profit that's adequate for the essential services that they provide. The county has the authority to set rates. The authority code is section 8.04.330, and it provides that increases or decreases in rates shall not be made by the board unless the board finds that the increase or decrease is based upon an increase or decrease in the cost of doing business or an increased cost of additional, better, or more comprehensive services. Our current rate system is a cost-based system. We do an annual review of detailed financial information and haulers' allocations of cost. Haulers share data related to wages, labor, finances, equipment, customer accounts, and operation expenses. The county continues to use the cost of service model. The annual review process includes the entire aggregate of the 9 certificated haulers. Based on the methodology that was put in place a few years ago, we continue to take deep financial dives on an annual basis. It's for a reduced number of haulers. Typically, these would be site visits done in person. The last 2 years, due to the pandemic, we've been virtual. This year, we selected the haulers, the 5 haulers with the highest reported revenue. The review process ensures that the costs are appropriately directed to the unincorporated ratepayers. We look at direct cost and indirect cost that might be shared across multiple jurisdictions. In determining whether to approve a rate change, there's a variety of items that you can see here that we would request the board consider. This includes investments in facilities and equipment, service management, local wage scales, customer concentrations, length of haul to disposal facilities and cost of disposal, methods of collection and transportation, a reasonable return on revenue for the haulers, and fair and reasonable rates for all community members. Our current rate structure uses a return on revenue methodology, and it's fairly simple. We take all of the revenues, we subtract the expenses, and we determine our profit. We then take the profit, divide it by the revenue to get our return on revenue. And the last few years, the target ROR has been 10%. So the actual cost and revenues are reviewed. We determine any adjustments that need to be made. And all the information that we're reviewing is submitted in a detailed cost report. And we receive those annually on March 15th has been the timeline for submittal. We look at the ROR over a 12-month period of time. So our revenue for 2020 was $31,726,988. Our profit was $2,254,126. And that gave us an ROR of 7.1%. We actually drill down a little bit further and we look at the individual Lines of service ROR. So the residential, which is our can cart customers, their ROR came in at 4.15%. Commercial, which is also containerized, came in at 11.87%. And then occasional containers and drop box came in at 12.66%. Averaged altogether, there is our 7.1%. I did want to note that this composite ROR did exclude one hauler that was didn't have complete adjustments submitted by our agreed upon deadline. So what does this mean for our standard rate review practice? The goal has been to bring the composite to 10%. So if this was a normal year, with residential coming in at 4.15%, staff would recommend an additional $1.3 million in revenue needed to raise the composite to 10%, and that equals a 6.5% increase. For the commercial or containerized, they performed over at 11.87% ROR. So we would actually look at reducing the revenue on that line of business by $125,000, and that would be a rate decrease of 2.7%. And Dropbox and Compactor also overperformed at 12.66%, and we would recommend reducing revenue by $164,000 in revenue, and that would be a decrease of 2.96%. However, we all know that 2020 was a special year, and we have compounding issues also in 2021. So first of all, I just wanted to walk through these three main points. The first would be, of course, the pandemic. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, Washington County's haulers have continued to provide solid waste collection service to our community. Although the solid waste collection system was spared from many of the pandemic's most severe economic impacts, the 2021 rate review did show material shifting between sectors and increased expenses outpacing revenue growth. This is particularly in the residential sector, where we had increased operating expenses that outweighed strong revenues. And that's how we landed at the 4.15% ROR. In addition to COVID, recycling markets still are not righted. And so it's our recommendation to continue the recycling processing surcharges. In 2018, the Board of Commissioners approved monthly recycling processing surcharges. They were designed to provide revenue to cover the unprecedented costs that were result of the market disruptions. These equated to a $2 fee on can cart collection and a 4% fee on commercial container collection. And then lastly, I'm going to discuss Metro Resolution 20-5142. Metro Resolution 20-5142's adoption in December increased the regional system fee and Metro transfer station fees for solid waste to be effective as of July 1st, 2021. The regional system fee and Metro transfer station fees for mixed solid waste are being increased by $15.47 per ton. In addition, the Metro excise tax will be increasing an additional $1.33, also effective July 1st, 2021. So our total tip fee increase per ton is $16.80. That's approximately a 17% increase in disposal cost. Staff wanted to take a further look at the Metro tip fee implications. The Metro tip fee adjustments will increase expenses for the second half of 2021 for all certificated haulers as they begin paying higher disposal rates. Staff enlisted Marina and Co. to calculate what the additional expenses associated with a $16.80 per ton increase would be, and also roll up additional fees and profit margin. An estimate was made looking at 6 months of tonnage, and the cost of the system over a 6-month period of time is estimated to be $494,000 for residential and $189 and $100 for commercial. So getting on to staff recommendations, and just zipped right through there. Sorry. I wanted to just extend my thanks. I know we issued an initial staff recommendation last week, but after having additional time to crunch the numbers, we did feel it important to issue an addendum and put forth several options, as this is a complicated rate review process. But this option here, this is option 1, and this is our preferred method. This is what is referred to in the revised staff report as option 1. And staff favors this option as it maintains our current practice of returning our ROR to 10%. And it also takes into account the Metro tip fee increases, so we can help offset some of those increased disposal costs that we know are coming. So what does this look like to average ratepayers? For residential can cart, we would recommend an adjustment of an 11.4% increase in rates. We would be needing the 1.3 million to get us to a 10% ROR, and then taking into account the additional revenue for the Metro tip fee, we would need an additional $988,000 to lift the system over the next 12 months. This equals $2.66 per month on a 32-gallon can cart. $1.52 of that is equated to the annual rate review, and $1.14 is Metro's portion of that increase. When we look at the commercial sector, commercial container would require an adjustment of a 4.2% increase. This is going to add an additional $253,000 lift to the system. This equals about $11.50 per month increase for a 4-yard container. And all of that is equated to the Metro increase. And with Dropbox, we recommend the decrease in rates of 2.96%. This results in a $3.98 decrease on the average 20-yard box pool. We do have alternate options. Option 2 is to adjust the ROR to 10% and not include the Metro disposal fee increase. This approach would require the haulers to begin paying the higher disposal cost without a commensurate increase in the rates. What this means for the average residential can cart customer is they would see an increase of $1.52 on a 32-gallon can. Commercial customers would see a 2.7% decrease. That equals about $5.45 on a 4-yard container. And Dropbox would see a decrease of 2.96% on it, and that's about $3.98 savings on a 20-yard box. This I know would be our standard approach in a normal rate review year, would be to adjust the system back to balance at the 10%. We have option 3. This would be to hold the ROR where it is, but do project out what the Metro disposal fee increase is and how that impacts the system. So this approach results in the residential line of service operating below 10% with a 6.44 ROR. To offset the Metro disposal fee adjustments, there would still require a rate increase. It equals about 5%, which is $1.14 a month increase on the 32-gallon can cart. And commercial rates would also require an increase of 6.27%. And this is $16.50 per month for a 4-yard container on a commercial account. And that gets you to an ROR of 14.55%. And I will note that is above our 10% threshold. And then Dropbox, these fees are actually a pass-through, disposal cost or a pass-through for Dropbox customers. So our recommendation would be that Dropbox remains the same with no adjustment. So it would hold at an ROR of 12.66%. And our last option that we put forth, I'm sure there's infinite options, is don't make any rate adjustments. Just hold the system at 7.1% ROR. If the system remains at a 7.1 ROR and absorbs the Metro disposal fee increase, staff estimate a significant reduction in ROR in the 2021 rate review cycle and beyond. There is a risk that larger rate increases in the future would be required to return to the target ROR of 10%. So staff recommends this approach. Staff proposes that the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee favorably recommend to the Washington County Board of Commissioners the following. Option 1 is laid out in the amended staff report. Residential can cart increase of 11.4%. Commercial and containerized rate increase of 4.2%. And a Dropbox decrease of 2.96%. We do have additional rates for consideration. First was establishing a commercial yard debris service rate. We're recommending $5.27 for a 60-gallon cart with biweekly service. And this rate does mirror residential service rates. Adjusting the extra yard debris cart to $4.24 for a 60-gallon cart for biweekly service and extend this rate to commercial customers. This is an increase from $1.50 for the biweekly service. There's additional details in the staff report that further detail this correction. We wanted to establish a can cart cleaning fee for commercial customers. We're recommending $16 per occurrence. The exception is food scrap customers do receive a 1-bin clean out or swap per year. And lastly, commercial food scraps bundled with disposal and recycling service effective March 31st of 2022. The bundling was recommended by SWAC in February of 2020, and Metro is proceeding with this commercial food scrap implementation on March 31st of 2022. The proposal is that food scrap collection is bundled at the current commercial garbage service rates. The bundle will include food scraps, recycling, and garbage collection services for a flat monthly fee. On March 31st, the current rates, which charge commercial food scraps at garbage rates, would be expired, and that would those were the rates that were implemented in July of 2019. Staff further recommends that all rate changes become effective July 1st of 2021 upon approval by the Washington County Board of Commissioners. And with that, I open it up to questions.
Well, I'll jump in because I'm always fearless. as everyone on the board knows, or on the committee knows, I have always felt that a return on revenue was an egregiously generous way to treat vendors, and a 10% return on revenue is much better than the traditional look at return on investment. And so when you're looking at the two, it's easy to be somewhat misled. A 10% return on investment is not out of line. A 10% return on revenue is. However, that's our marching orders, and we will continue. The county has said that's what they want as the standard, and we'll continue to adhere to that. I do have one technical question on how you generate. How does the implementation of expense get accounted for? I mean, fuel is easy. You just look to see how many gallons you bought and how much you paid for it, and there you have it. But things like new equipment and assets, whose depreciation tables do you use, and how do you arrive at how much you get to expense it this year? Like, if you replace all the plastic containers, is that a one-shot expense that gets dumped into that year's revenue and expenses, or is there a standard out there, an industry-wide standard that says a plastic tub lasts for 8 years or whatever?
Sure. I'm going to defer to Danny because she dives into that information for us. But yes, there are depreciation schedules that were utilized depending on the line of service.
Exactly. They come out and say a can will last you 5 years, 7 years, and then it is depreciated over that lifespan. So it's not we bought all these cans and the expense hits the 1 year. It is spread out. And then as far as how it's allocated to different jurisdictions, Washington counties, I don't remember, it's either by customer count or I believe it's by customer count. Each jurisdiction does it a little bit differently, but they do have allocation methods to make sure that it's done consistently year over year. And the haulers provide us with their depreciation reports as part of their annual DCR, detailed cost report, submission to the county.
And Ken, I want to, your initial comment about the return. I think it's important for you and the committee to know that this is your recommendation. And you can make any recommendation you feel comfortable making. So past practice, current practice, that should not make you feel like you're boxed in. So I just want to say that. It doesn't mean that's what the board's going to do, and that doesn't mean that's what the board's done in the past, but that's your purpose as an advisory body to the board. So that's up to you.
Well, as long as I've been on the committee, I've had a couple of issues. One was the ROR approach rather than an ROI approach. And the other one was franchises at all, as against having open competition. Because my research has indicated that municipalities that do not have any kind of franchise or exclusivity option end up with rates about half of what ours are. And it's a very limited sample. I use Minneapolis as my example. And so for essentially the same, weekly service and what have you. But I have been not supported by the rest of the committee since the get-go. So I just remain sort of a lone voice out in the wilderness saying, these things are not the way it has to be, but I don't think I can talk the committee into adopting a totally different approach.
And a little bit on the ROR versus ROI, and Kathy is kind of an expert on this. She actually worked in the Utilities and Transportation Commission in the state of Washington, and part of the reason we use an ROR approach in the solid waste system is because the level of investment is not as substantial as it is in like a utility setting system. So if you're building a $500 million power plant, that return on investment calculation makes a little bit different sense. I understand what you're saying, and I think that that's the reason ROR is used versus ROI, but what the ROR is set at is, that's a policy decision, essentially.
Does anybody else have? Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
I think I have 3 questions. I'm going to start off with the bundling the food scrap program cost in March, I think is what I heard. And my question is, what about the first 9 months? The first 9 months, people that are involved with the food scrap program are paying for that. And then all of a sudden, March hits and they don't have to pay for it. That seems like, why are we waiting that long? I know that City of Beaverton bundles the cost of food scrap. So
yeah, so the significance of March 31st, 2022 is that's when the commercial food scraps collection requirement goes into effect. So Aaron noted in the staff report that your committee recommended bundling rates in February of 2020, so February of last year, to be effective March 31st of last year. And we were a week away from the board meeting to do that action, and then the governor shut down the state of Oregon with the pandemic. So we pulled that agenda item off of the board meeting because it was an inopportune time to make such a big shift in rates for businesses and haulers. And then subsequently, the commercial food scraps collection mandate was delayed by a year, initially by Metro to March 31st, 2021. And then earlier or late 2020, they delayed it another year to March 31st, 2022. So the significance of that date is that's the spirit of the same date to align with the mandate. So we are setting it up as a policy decision that when the mandate takes effect, businesses that are then required to collect food scraps separate from garbage are not going to be faced with the financial decision or the financial requirement to acquire the service. So it becomes part of the collection system services. And those costs will show up in the system in future rate reviews when costs and expenses are evaluated, and they'll essentially be rolled into the system just like recycling is.
Right. Okay, then my next question, and I'm sorry, I probably should have asked this last week sometime, but I'm wondering how through the COVID process, how the bad debt that haulers have incurred is reflected in the rate review formula.
That's a good question. Danny can probably speak to some of it. This was a big topic of conversation. So in 2020, we worked with the Haulers Association, and you might recall the haulers voluntarily agreed to initiate a service termination moratorium. So essentially we said, we're not shutting people down we're not cutting off garbage service for non-payment, similar to the eviction moratoriums. And that presumably would increase bad debt that's on the books. So we did implement the emergency garbage bill assistance program between the months of September and December of 2020. That introduced about $52,000 of bills were paid by Community Action, our community partner, through that program. That was probably a pretty small portion of the bills that weren't getting paid from what we saw on the reports the haulers sent. Our strategy for this year is we wanted to make sure that the system didn't have bad debt dumped on it in order to kind of put it all into one rate review season. So we added a section of our DCRs that said, you need to outline your bad debt policy, essentially. So how do you retire bad debt? How long do you carry it? When do you send someone to collection, so that we could document the practice and that it wasn't changing because of the amount of bad debt on the books, and it wasn't getting dumped into this year's rate review. I don't know, Danny, if you can add a little bit to that, maybe you looked into it a little bit more.
For the 2020 rate review, what was reported, there was not a significant change for this year from prior years that we have seen. And like Tom said, I think the important thing that had been discussed was that the process remained consistent for the hauler. So if your policy says after 3 months, we turn them over to collections, they kept that policy the same and they're accounted for it the same. And so I don't know if it was because of the moratorium. Probably the 20 numbers were not much different than the 19 or 18 numbers. And there is a specific bad debt line item on the DCR where they list that expense. So it'll be interesting to see what shows up in 2021.
Okay, thank you. My last question, I think I bring this every time we do a rate review, is the surcharge. Why is it, I can't get my head around it. Why is it we are not rolling that in and embracing it?
So we, in 2019, this was before my time, but before I was in managing the rate review process, staff recommended that we roll it in. The Board of Commissioners thought it was too soon and they wanted us to keep it separate. Last year, we didn't make any rate adjustments, so it stayed separate. This year, we're not recommending rolling it in because of Senate Bill 582. So we feel that part of the justification or part of the need for Senate Bill 582 is the increase in recycling costs as a result of National Sword and the recycling market crash. So that surcharge was put in place to offset those increased costs. And we feel that it's important that we show our commissioners and we show our system the true costs of that recycling market crisis. And if Senate Bill 582 does pass, that might inject money into the system that helps offset some of those costs. And we don't want to bake that surcharge into the rates if there's an opportunity for some of that cost to be offset by producers in a producer responsibility program. So if it doesn't happen and we continue down this road, we will likely reconsider that position. But I think this year with 582 in play, we feel it's important for us to keep that on the table and we don't lose track of it in the rates if we roll it up. Does that make sense?
Yes, I mean, it's up here.
Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, I know there's a reasoning behind it. There always is, but it's just, you know, it's been a long time since we've had this surcharge. And I just thought it would go away by now. So that answers my question. Thank you all. I appreciate your time and talent. Thank you.
So Tom, has the ability to dispose of stuff that's recycled that caused this crisis in the first place recovered? Have we found alternate markets to take all the scrap paper and what have you, or are they in plastic? Or are they still just piling up in warehouses?
Since we have a MRF operator on the committee, I will defer to Vinod on the answer to that question.
Right.
Let's go to the unmute. So yeah, things have moved around. There's more domestic consumption of the mixed paper. For us particularly, we never really exported cardboard. Some facilities did. That was affected, but there's a lot of OCC, old corrugated cardboard mills. There's a number of mills in the Pacific Northwest so that they can handle that. Prices have improved since the crash, but they're not covering the processing costs like they once did. Because for years and years we put money back into the system, so that's why it was such a shock to the system when we started taking it out. So yeah, and there's a lot more domestic homes. There's things that go to Canada. So if you consider that exporting, there's still export markets. There's still material that's getting shipped overseas because at least on the West Coast, we don't have the mixed paper hunger, the capacity to process it all. Where on the East Coast, there's more mills that are handling that mixed paper and making pulp lap and either sending that to China or making products here. So there's been some recovery, but it's not complete. And I was just going to add to that, since I'm already talking, that Metro fee will affect recycling rates too, because we dispose of a lot of garbage. So that's going to affect that rate too. So that's something, I don't know if you guys accounted for that in the system or not. So that's just an added.
Yeah, and it's a good reminder, Sue, kind of speaking to the surcharge piece. So when the Senate Bill 582 was crafted with the DQ and the steering committee, there was a process towards the beginning of the year when the legislation was getting drafted that said, what does it mean to protect ratepayers from costs, recycling costs, essentially. And the standard that the DQ used was to return the cost to pre-National Sword levels. So essentially, make it so that the system is not paying for the recycling like it is now, but back to like what it was before the market crash. And so I think that's just another example of, if that comes to fruition and that vision is realized by producer responsibility and producer funding coming into the recycling system, that presumably can allow jurisdictions like Washington County to say, look at this processing fee, let's reevaluate whether it needs to be there. And if it's baked into the rate, I think it changes that conversation and it makes it more difficult to pull it back out than if it stays separate as a line item.
Then you get your $2 back.
Yeah, I guess, right. And I know Beth has had her hand up very patiently for a while, so.
Did that answer your question, Ken? Did that help at all?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I assumed it was coming back, but hadn't made it all the way back yet, so.
And there's more mill announcements on the horizon that are coming out that are going to consume that mixed paper, which was what got us in trouble, because that's the more than half of what's in that mix. So.
Hey, Beth, you're on.
Thank you. I just had to comment, Ken, on your franchise statements. So I probably could talk too long, so I'll try to do this succinctly. But I have been personally on both sides of the franchise as a regulator and now working for industry. And so I have professed to see the benefits of franchising. And in the solid waste system in particular, without franchising, a lot of regulation dictates much of the activity. So the solid waste collection is a heavily regulated industry in Oregon, and Washington County is no exception. And by having the franchise, the local governments are able to say, okay, here's your territory. You don't have trucks driving back and forth all over your community to do their collection services. You have regulated rates. You have assurances that all members of your community have access at affordable rates to your garbage collection, and also our whole suite of services as the community requests. So that includes your yard debris and food waste and yard debris and recycling. And in fact, franchising was largely started so that communities could meet their recycling goals. And if you look nationwide, a number of communities since the national sword were not able to continue their recycling activities. And we've obviously had to have rate adjustments, but we have not had interrupted service. And that is quite remarkable. So I could continue, but I'll just stop there. So you
before you
couldn't stop with that door open there, Ken. Thank you.
And before you joined the committee, Jeff Murray always stepped in and tried to straighten me out as well. So we are what we are. And I would have enjoyed for most of my life not having any marketing costs, having a guaranteed market, just be in business. And it just amazes me that the haulers have no marketing costs. And for many small companies, that's your biggest single expense after wages. So it's a different business model, and it is a peripheral cost. It's not real high. And so, as long as it remains more or less affordable, it's fine. I just feel like the haulers are making out like bandits, and I can't object to their trying and using a business model like that. But I think we have to acknowledge it or I feel I have to acknowledge it for what it is. So, and with respect to regulation, other industries are closely regulated, especially aviation, without giving people monopolies. The aviation industry stopped having monopolies 20 or 30 years ago. So it used to be done just that way. And there could only be one airline that serviced between, say, Portland and San Francisco, or two, or whatever. But way back a long time ago, maybe even 50 years ago, they said, no, we're going to deregulate it, and price can float, which resulted in a lot of fundamental changes. So I acknowledge that. Anyway, go ahead.
Austin has his hand up too.
Yeah, maybe getting confused, but the staff report document, the staff recommendation, is it different than the PowerPoint recommendation? If you look on
the addendum, we issued the addendum to the staff report. So the original staff report has a different staff recommendation. So you should be looking at the addendum as replacing the original. And I can point out
Is that not what was attached in the email?
The most recent email is the addendum. That is correct.
With the 8.95% recommendation.
That's the original. That's the one that was redacted.
Okay.
So the big difference there is when we initially projected the increased cost from the Metro disposal fee increase, we used 6 months of tonnage because we looked at the second 6 months of 2021. So July 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. And we used that as the cost increase. And then we spread that cost increase out over the next rate period, which is 12 months. So 6 months of cost spread over 12 months, essentially cut the increase in half. And we had several conversations with the Hauler Association, and we saw that the costs and correctly are not going away. So Metro is going to increase its tip fee by 17% on July 1st, 2021, and that will carry forward for however long. So they will continue to incur those costs next year. So that would have been half of the amount for the Metro increase, but it would have resulted in a larger increase next year. So it would have started compounding next year. And we're also hearing signals from Metro, they might have another rate increase next year. So if you have a compounding need for more revenue in the system from the previous year, and then you raise rates again on the disposal, it kind of is gonna start snowballing. So we agreed that we think we need to pass the whole thing on so that the haulers aren't picking up half of it and then it's kind of compounds into the future year.
Yeah, so the 11.4 is the correct recommendation. Yes. Okay, so okay. And I think when I first joined, I joined right after we had not had an increase for 5 years because they had increased it so much before that they were fine. I guess, this is a pretty substantial increase as well, and if next year the pandemic changes and reverses, are we going to be stuck with the higher rate? I mean, I see, you're proposing a Dropbox decrease, but, there seems like there's more risk as a customer to increasing significantly now rather than kind of stair-stepping it and slowly absorbing that cost to really, catch where the rising prices are. Because I know we skipped a year last year as well, but, do you think we would actually decrease if we overshoot, or is the stability of the system going to be brought in again and say, let's just keep this and wait for the system to catch up to this increase?
Really good question. I think that's a fundamental question that our approach to rate setting is challenged by in Washington County. So many jurisdictions have a range, a target range. So they'll say the goal is that the system collects between 8 and 12% return on revenue. If it comes in below 8, it's corrected to 10. If it comes in above 12, it's corrected down to 10. So there's some wiggle room. Right now, our approach has kind of a hard, fast 10% target. If it's below 10, it goes up. Historically, if it's above 10, it hasn't always gone down. It's my preference as the solid waste manager that if it goes up, it should go down too. So I would be proposing a rate decrease if we come in above 10 next year, like we are for commercial and Dropbox. And there's some reasons for that. Part of it is the extra yard debris cart rate that we are proposing increases from $1.50 to $4.25 is a accident, in my opinion, from 2017, when instead of taking a rate decrease, we said, let's lower yard debris cart rates. Let's get rid of the recycling charge for extra carts. What that did is it accidentally created a cost signal in the rates that encouraged customers to request 40 yard debris carts for 1 month, and haulers were dealing with these insane requests, and they were shocked by the $1.50 a month cart charge. And really, it just kind of turned the system upside down in a sense in terms of the relationship between the rate structure. So we're correcting that. And I think that happened because we didn't want to lower the rate. So I think you're right, Ashwin. There is a real chance that it comes in high if there's a correction in some of the data that happened this year. One of those assumptions could be that what we saw was increased costs were due to increased disposal at the residential sector, increased truck time in neighborhoods because there was more traffic, there was more cars parked on the streets, there was more set outs, more extra set outs. It took the drivers longer to serve the same customers, and those costs all rolled into the system. So one could say, well, in 2021 and 2022, that's not going to be the case anymore, and those costs of serving the residential sector might return back to pre-pandemic levels. And if that happens and we just experience a 12% increase, we might be in a position where we're over collecting. And I think that's the challenge of the approach that we have embodied here in terms of shooting for a hard target of 10% and not using forward-looking costs. We're using real costs from the past and we're correcting to 10. So we're always kind of going to be chasing what happened in the past year. So it's a very real possibility. And I guess one of my thoughts is, hey, a rate decrease is never really a bad thing. So if it needs to get goes up this year and next year they come in at 12 and we need to decrease the rates by 5%, I don't think anybody's going to complain about it. It does kind of create this bouncing rate, but I don't know if that's necessarily bad policy either. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I'm just surprised that for 5 years we kept a higher rate, if that would be the approach, but maybe
that would not necessarily be my staff recommendation if I was responsible.
And Ashwin, the reason for the high rate for the 5 years is we erroneously assumed at the beginning of that period that diesel prices were going to continue going up and stay high, and so we built that into our projections, then we never backed off. And I agree with Tom. We should reduce the rate in the years where it was excessive. We over increased the rate, and it took a number of years for it to catch up and for inflation to catch up with it and bring it back down to 10%.
And it's my personal policy that if we have to always increase rates because it's not hitting 10%, if it's below, then we should always do the same on the other side of the coin. So if the ratepayers are paying too much, they deserve their money back too. And if the haulers are not getting paid enough, then if the agreement is that we're going to be working at 10, then it goes two ways.
Yeah. Yep. Do we have a mechanism to change that guidance instead of being a 10%?
That the board could change that guidance. The committee could recommend that guidance is changed. So that is not written in code. It's practice and procedure. So the board could change that. Yeah.
But it's the county commissioners that tasked us to hit a 10% return on revenue.
Yeah, it was kind of a yes.
I was just going to add to the crystal balling. I think a lot of the stuff that you see in the people working from home are going to continue working from home. There's not going to be, a quick return. And then I've never seen more drop boxes in my neighborhood than I have this last year. So, I mean, that's to say it was overachieving, it is, but you might not see that next year. I don't know. That's just.
And that's part of the agreement for our system is the reason we have a higher return too, is that we agreed with Hauler Association that we're not going to get into the business of projecting costs. So we're not going to start debating fuel futures or what I described, because we're going to look back at real costs and use real numbers, and we're not going to argue over essentially how much is disposal going to go up or how much is it going to go down. And it's like you said, Yvonne, it's a crystal ball and there's not a right answer, and there's always an infinite amount of opinion. So I think looking back at real costs gives us the confidence that what we're evaluating really did happen, and we're not just making projections up. And I think it eases the conversation over what the costs are in the system.
So Tom, does Metro have other sources of revenue besides the tipping fee, or is that their main source of revenue? So when they feel like they're needing more money, they have to raise the tipping fee because they don't have anything else
So they have the tipping fees has three components at Metro. There's the excise tax, which is a general government tax. So that pays for Metro's general government services. It pays the salaries of Metro counselors and general government, finance, HR, non-solid waste dedicated funding. Then they also have the Metro, the operational fee, which is part of their rate, and that presumably pays for the cost of operating transfer stations, of taking garbage to the landfill, of disposing of it at the landfill, the hauling, those kinds of costs that are operational. Then they have the regional system fee, which is another element of that fee, and that pays for regional programming and planning and the work that our staff does on education outreach programs and grants to local governments. So there's really 3 components there. 2 of them are dedicated to solid waste, and then the excise tax is a general government tax.
Thank you.
I
I'll move that we, oh, go ahead, Sue.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. Just so I'm sure, when you're talking about the additional yard debris cart, that's a cart that's going to be picked up every week. Is that correct?
Every other week.
Well, yeah. That's what I mean.
Yep.
But,
Same cycle.
If, for instance, as a customer, I have a container that I put out with additional yard debris.
That's an extra can or bundle. So
Right.
that was part of the problem. So what happened is we have a fee that's for like a craft bag or 32-gallon brute, extra yard debris set out essentially. And that fee is about $3.25. When the rate for the extra cart went to $1.50, it became cheaper than just setting out one extra. So customers that had like leaf season, they said, well, I'm going to order 20 of these bad boys and I'm going to take them for 1 month and I'm going to fill them up. And then when I'm done with them, I'm going to say, come pick up your carts. I'm done. And it's going to cost me 20 bucks. So really flipped the rate incentive upside down from people moving away from that extra bundle service.
So this doesn't replace an extra bundle that you might put out.
No.
Okay. That's what I wanted
It just
to know.
increases the cost back to what it would have been before the rate reduction for the second cart.
Right. Okay.
I see Beth use up hands.
Yeah, so Kit Johnson is present and he's our rate expert beyond me. And I believe he might have a couple of things to add. Is it possible to have him speak?
Right now, is he listening?
Yeah, we could promote him at your behest, Chair Foot.
Are you proposing to have him speak now or some other time?
Sure, I think it's appropriate if we want to give him a couple minutes to speak now.
I just don't see him on my screen. Is he on somewhere?
I will need to promote him. Give me just one moment.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Kit.
Perfect.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for thanks for the promotion. It's the first promotion I've had in quite some time, Aaron, so I appreciate that. Yeah, I do have a couple of prepared remarks I'd just like to make in support of county staff's recommendation. And I appreciate the diversity of opinions on the group, and it's actually been very fun for me to sort of listen in to the discussion. Overall, I usually don't have the opportunity to do so it's been fun to listen. And but I also think that there's a couple of things as I go I might just try to weigh in on, because I think that some of it may be misinterpreted, and so if I may, I'll speak to that as well. But thanks first of all for allowing me to make a few comments for to the Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee. As you can see on the screen, my name is Kit Johnson. I represent the members of the Washington County Haulers Association as their rate consultant, which means that I get pretty intensively involved with the haulers and county staff about 2 months a year. As we've discussed, our members are comprised of 9 waste and recycling companies that are certificated as franchises within Washington County to manage the safe collection of solid waste and recyclables throughout the county on behalf of its citizens. This annual rate review process is an opportunity for the county to collect, review, and in some cases adjust important financial and metric data that comes directly from the haulers. And when I talk about data here, you people, folks that are financially oriented might think that this is primarily an income statement because we're measuring return on revenue as the bottom line metric. There's actually over 600 pieces of data that go into these detailed cost reports. And much of it is detailed breakdown by service of cost information, but much of it is also information that the county desires to understand what's happening in the waste community. And so that's things like number of carts, number of customers, size of carts, number of labor hours for a particular service, number of truck hours for a particular service. So these are very exhaustive reports that we're talking about that the haulers are both providing and that the county staff are reviewing, and with the assistance of Marina is challenging in many cases, and that's the audit process that we go through every year. This process, however, enables county government to ensure that the services are provided economically and consistently to all citizens, regardless which company is providing the service. And though requiring considerable effort by both parties, in most years, the process is reasonably routine and completed without undue difficulty. Just as an aside, I wanted to speak just a little bit to the concept of the ROR. So however you come down on it philosophically, I want to make sure that you don't assume that ROR is a guarantee. It is not. It is not, as Tom and others have said, the county looks retroactively back at what happens last year and says, okay, we came in at 7% as an overall ROR. The only thing that they're doing then is that they are trying to reset the rates so that the haulers have a chance to move toward that 10% target next year. There's no retroactive adjustment. There's no guarantee that 10% is going to be obtained. And there's still a considerable amount of sort of competition in the way that haulers run their individual businesses that come into play. The other thing that I might add on that ROR is that ROR is not necessarily equivalent to profit or after-tax net income. The ROR, out of it comes whatever money is going to be reinvested in the business. The ROR doesn't consider costs that you might normally consider as normal in running a business but are disallowed for whatever reason. An example of this might be certain related party compensation expenses and things like that get reduced. And ultimately at the end, whatever residual is left over out of that ROR becomes the profit to the company. So the 10% ROR is a target for all of those things. It's not a target for a guaranteed income. This year, we had a little bit of a monkey wrench thrown into our process in that, as Aaron has adequately discussed, Metro increased the cost of disposal by roughly 17%. It should be known, right up there with labor, disposal fees are the largest costs incurred by the haulers, historically accounting for over 25% of revenue earned. So a 17% increase to this already sizable expense was unprecedented, and it threatened to represent a considerable strain on the system. Working closely with county staff and their advisors, we've collaboratively found a solution to mitigate this new challenge, and it is a challenge. They didn't get into some of the numbers, but the compounding effect, if left unaddressed, is very significant. We're talking about several $1 million over a couple of years, especially if Metro goes forward with another increase in 2022. So it's a significant challenge. Option one in your rate memorandum addendum that's supported by staff is supported by the haulers as well. In fact, we believe it's the only option presented that will not cause a severe strain to the system resulting from those disposal increases. I want you to know that it's always a good challenge. We have a very good relationship, but staff continues to advocate zealously for solutions that are economical, that are fair to county citizens, and that maintain a healthy and sustainable system of waste and recycling management. We support those objectives. It's nice for us if we have some level of predictability to what's happening and what we're trying to manage to, and those objectives help with that predictability. once again, just as a final comment, as it relates to the options in front of you, we are very supportive of the recommendation. We appreciate the opportunity to be heard. And a couple of just additional comments. One is the concern that we overshoot the mark on the 10% that I believe Ashwin brought up, which is a great question. I don't think it was 5 years that we overshot the mark, but it was at least 3 years that we overshot the mark back around 14, 15, and 16. There's a couple of things that mitigate that you should consider here. One is that the Metro tip fee increase portion of that isn't going to have an impact. It's cost in and basically cost out. So it's going to end at the dollar increase that Metro has published. So it's highly unlikely to have much of an impact on overshooting the mark. So that leaves you in the case of residential with the 6.4% or whatever the figure was, and whether that overshoots the mark. The difference between now and several years ago is the county put in a change to the pace in which these adjustments are made. So it used to be that if we had a $500,000 shortfall in the past year, that $500,000, the rate adjustment would allow that $500,000 to be made up in the last half of the following year. That's changed in the last couple of years. And so that $500,000 is half made up of in the last half of the current year and half made up of in the first half of the subsequent year. And so the chances of overshooting are significantly lessened because of that difference in pace that the adjustments are rolled out. So that's one thing there. Yeah, I think that's what I had to say. I'm happy to answer any questions from the hauler's perspective if you have any, and appreciate again the opportunity to be heard.
Okay, nothing's been said. I'll put a motion on the table that we recommend to the commissioners that they accept the staff report. Option one with I think it was the one with the largest rate increase, and included Metro and the others. I wasn't happy with the other two options, so I recommend we accept the first option and to the county.
So do we need to make a motion to accept option one? Because if so, I'll make that motion, or I'll second it if you're making it first.
Let's just say I move we accept option one, and you can second it, and we'll, if somebody wants to modify or change it, we can do that. Okay. Does anybody, since this voting process on Zoom is somewhat cumbersome, does anybody, all those in favor, is everybody prominently in favor, or is anybody opposed? Okay. I don't have any opposition, so I'll say it's unanimous and we'll go there. Are you okay with that, Tom?
Yeah, I'm looking at Sandra because I didn't see a thumbs up or anything, and I want to make sure that you have your voice heard if you have something.
Well, I'm not a fan of the rate decrease of the Dropbox and the commercial. I was kind of wondering if there's a way to just not include that and pass that on to the residential. But the only option that kind of fits that is option 3, and that's quite a decrease there. I was just waiting to
so
hold
are you asking like
out.
if the over earnings in commercial and Dropbox can be used to offset the residential under earning?
I mean, it's not much. It's what, 300,000. But
yeah, so
with the whole thing with COVID and rate increases right now, everybody's strapped, and the whole just this 1 year because of COVID. I don't know.
Yeah.
That was my thinking. But
no, it's an understandable thought and suggestion. I'd say in the past there have been the commercial has subsidized residential, and we'd worked over the last 10 years or so to undo that and have each line of service kind of pay for itself. So if that's, if you want to advocate for that, you can certainly put that on the record and you can make that motion. But that is kind of what we've done, is kind of undone that because just wasn't really, didn't make much sense to have the commercial subsidizing the resi. And I think, you know, it's a good observation, and it's something staff talked about too, is it time to pass a 12% rate increase onto residential customers? A couple of considerations we thought through. One is that the residential can cart customer is a single family home customer. And I think that is a lot of our community members that we saw in COVID that were dealing with utility assistance issues and needs, and losing income and jobs, were living in the multifamily sector. And that kind of held true through a lot of things. And we saw that in our garbage bill assistance program. In the we thought we would see more people taking advantage of garbage bill relief programs. We estimated 120,000, and we were able to get 52,000 out. So that was something we saw there. Another part of our recommendation really to the board about this is that we feel like, because costs are going up and because we're seeing Metro increasing the pressure on rates, that we want to start looking into income rate assistance programs, similar to what we did in light of COVID. So those are emergency rate assistance programs. Is there a way to fund folks that are on the verge of losing their service, to get them over a hard period of time? And then also start researching and looking into maybe more equitable income, more equitable rate structures. Is there a way for us to tier our rates so that folks in a low income, meet low income criteria can pay less for the service than folks that don't meet low income criteria? That does mean that some folks pay more to help other folks pay less because the cost doesn't go away. But those are things that I think we need to really look into and think through and explore and uncover. And I think this is an opportunity for us to commit to doing that when talking about a large rate increase. So that's my staff response. And I understand the concern, Sandra, and I understand that that our board might have a very similar concern.
I'm a little confused about how the delinquencies could be in multifamilies when most multifamily, like apartment complex, is one big dumpster or several dumpsters and not an individual bill.
So it's not, that's what I was trying to say. It wasn't, it wasn't. So we provided the bill assistance program, assuming that more folks were going to be taking advantage of it. And we saw less demand for it because the households that are responsible for their bills individually are households that live in single family homes, detached homes, or townhomes. The folks that in Community Action ran our program for us, and they also do energy assistance and water assistance. And most of the applicants for energy assistance through the COVID pandemic were in apartment communities. And so those folks didn't need to or didn't take advantage of garbage assistance because they weren't directly responsible for garbage bills.
There may not have been as much knowledge to single family residents too of this program.
Absolutely.
I mean, the only part I heard about it was through to this committee. I never saw anything in my garbage bill or anything saying, hey, if you need assistance, there's this program. I'm sure it was advertised some places, but the word wasn't, it was for such a short period of time and the word wasn't really spread out or advertised. There might have been more people. A better way to judge this would be your delinquency people right now. What percentage are, well, I guess most of it would be single family because multifamily is big dumpsters and not individual bills there.
And as Danny noted, that kind of was part of Sue's question, and we were expecting to see higher levels of bad debt. So essentially bills that never got paid, and if a bill never gets paid, they essentially write it off as bad debt. We're never going to collect this revenue, and that becomes an expense on the system. And those bad debt lines were not out of whack as much as we thought they might be from 2019. We expected to see more bad debt on the books than we did.
That's good.
Yeah. But I always say this, I said this to Sue last year, if you don't like it, you don't have to vote for it. It does not, every decision does not have to be unanimous. It can be a 5-1, it can be a 3-2. It's a decision and you vote your conscience. So if you don't want to vote for it, do not feel peer pressure to do that. That's your prerogative.
Well, that was me just a couple months ago. But this, I was looking at everybody else's. I really was on the fence on all of this, and if everybody else approves it, I really have no, it's not that big of a difference. Really.
Okay, well, in the interest of moving along, I will say it was a unanimous and we'll go forward. How's that, Tom?
I see no disagreement.
Perfect. And this is the last time is for open forum or open time to talk. If anybody has any extra comments or thoughts, now is the time. So, Kit, what's the beautiful mountain behind you?
Wait,
Sue's got an extra comment.
I do. I'm going to get to Sue in a minute. I want to find out what the mountain is behind Kit.
Boy, I can't actually remember the exact name of it, but it's the second highest mountain in Peru, actually. So
thank you.
Did some hiking around it this last or 2 years ago.
Okay, it didn't look like one of ours. Go ahead, Sue.
I just want to again thank staff for the work doing the rate review. I know it's a tremendous effort, and I also appreciate the haulers sending in their information. So Beth, please let them know that we appreciate that. And I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. And I would also just put a reminder out that next month is June 10th is the meeting, and we're on, and we are anticipating to have this public hearing with Ridwell. So Kathy, I see your hand up too.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that you all should have the email in your inbox with the Ridwell document as well as the Washington County Hauler Association proposal. So
thank you. Well, there being no other things, we're adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
bye.
Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for joining the May 13th Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting. As discussed, this meeting was recorded and will be posted to our website within 1 week. Thank you.